Good day to you from the Higher Grounds Podcast. Thank you for being with us today. Today on this podcast, we're going to be interviewing Michael Lindsay. He is one of the crew members of the Christian Construction Podcast. And we're going to be talking to him about how their podcast is going and the audience that they are reaching. Brother Stephen Aldridge is also in studio with us today. And we're going to have a great time just fellowshipping with a good cup of coffee and talking about friendship and the good things of God. You stay tuned to the Higher Grounds Podcast. Welcome back to the Higher Grounds Podcast. Thank you for joining us on this episode today. This is a special episode. Good to have our partner in crime back beside of us. Brother Stephen, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm glad I'm back in studio. I'm glad you guys kept my coffee cup here ready to go.
Well, Charlie's been filling in for you while you have been gone.
Got old Charlie.
Yeah, he's done a good job.
Yep.
He's he's had about as much input as you normally do.
Well,
about 5 minutes worth.
Yeah, about 5 minutes worth. Yeah,
yeah, that's a brutal way to get the podcast started. I'm glad there's no grudges or anything.
I've been up since 3 this morning. So
oh yeah, that's true.
It's
it's only 4.
Yeah. The next morning, right?
The next morning.
Yeah. How you doing, Brother Michael?
I'm doing well.
No, not Michael Poindexter, but rather Michael the Lindsay.
They favor a little bit.
They do kind of.
The hair. I'm losing the mains. What about it? My head's not as big as his, though.
Oh.
Can you believe he took a shot at Michael Poindexter?
We don't.
He's not even here, and he took a shot at him.
He's not here.
We don't do that
though.
on here.
That will be.
This
edited.
won't air for 3 months. It's okay.
That will be edited.
I'll find another reason for him to be. We'll get it all water under the bridge.
Don't worry, we'll edit that.
Well, it's good that we can poke fun at one another, I suppose.
Oh, yeah. If you don't, the old says, if you don't learn to laugh at yourself, don't worry, we will.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
That's our theme of our youth group.
That's exactly right.
That's what Andy told Opie.
That's
I'm pretty sure that's exactly how he said it.
It was episode 4.
He's got them memorized. Amen.
It's the only thing you can watch if you're in.
Exactly right.
Bonanza.
Oh man.
Bonanza, Andy Griffin.
You watch Bonanza?
Gunsmoke because it was clean, right?
Yeah.
Because you had a
yeah.
that was good children's viewership.
We're going to have to stop this now.
Clean it up, Lord.
Well, again, thank you for being with us on the podcast today. We do have a good time and a kid back and forth, but it's good to have Michael Lindsay with us on the podcast today. If you remember, back in January of this year, we interviewed Brother Michael in regard to the bus ministry.
Yep.
And the episode, I think, aired maybe in March,
April, something like that.
Yeah, March or April. And after that, Brother Michael and I got to talking. He said, I really enjoyed doing the podcast. He said, what can we do in regard to maybe getting one started? And they... he and his compatriots, they started the Christian Construction Podcast. When
started it, our first episode aired on the first Thursday in April. We began work on it right there in end of January, right after you interviewed me, and it just kind of took off. And of course, the first time you mentioned it to me was in October. We were at Stanley Kelly's. Right. And talked about it, and then once I kind of saw it all working, I thought, man, we could really do that.
Oh yeah.
Not that we could do it better than y'all, but just thinking about the avenue and then the just the ear that you have with people, and it's something people crave, some content.
Oh yeah.
It's just like you crave fellowship. You want that person that don't want to hear what nobody else has to say. I'm kind of, leery of that person. But I want it in the multitude of, safety in the multitude of counselors.
Absolutely.
That's the kind of stuff.
And there's a lot of podcasts that are out there for all different kinds of things.
Sure.
And I think that, we don't need less. We need more. It's just like we need more men writing good books. We need more writers and on and on.
That's right.
And we just need some guys that are using this medium as well, like you guys are.
Well, this is that's the reason why we're having you on.
Yeah.
And of course, we've been together in youth camp and stuff this week. But I had spoken to you earlier about giving a plug to the Christian Construction Podcast,
Sure.
and the reason is we're not competing with one another. This is a venue and a medium by which we can we can reach a lot of people, and there are folks that will reach here at Higher Grounds that Brother Michael and his crew will not reach, and vice versa.
Oh, yeah.
And it's we've been astounded since January of 2019 as to the response to the Higher Grounds podcast.
Yeah.
Haven't you?
I have. This summer we've been in some different places and camps and those kinds of things, and I've just been. It's been a blessing to hear people talk about not just, hey, we've been listening to the podcast, but then them go into detail and say, man, this helped me, and talk about an episode they watched and reach back to some truth, that they found. And sometimes, and I've even said this, even to find out who's listening, people who aren't normally social media people or keep up with something like that, they're listening to it,
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's been a blessing, and to see the Lord do that.
Well, we were. I got a communication from Brother Michael today. He was out of town for his anniversary, and he had heard back from some folks. I don't even think I've told you, but he had heard from some folks of his from Lighthouse and Seagrove who were traveling out in Nebraska. And while they were out there in Nebraska, they met some folks at the event they were at, and it was a secular event, and they got to talking back and forth and found out they were Christians, and began to put some two and twos together, and come to find out this person whom they didn't know, whom we don't know, were watching. They were watching the Higher Grounds podcast in Nebraska.
Wow,
and
that's crazy.
It's just it's tremendous, what God has done through the podcast,
Sure,
and the folks that we get to minister to, and correspond with on a weekly basis.
It's interesting. You were saying that about we don't need less, we need more. And I think me and you talked about this when you interviewed me. Somebody had to have the first bus mission.
Right.
Somebody had to have the first this or that. Somebody had to have the first radio broadcast. And, really, as the medium of radio, as we know it, is starting to fade out, this is becoming, this is our modern day radio broadcast.
It is.
And so in that regard, I would say, again, I agree, we need more of this, not less of this. And we agree on, I think we agree on a bunch of stuff. But even then, there's so much that y'all are talking about that we're not talking about, and then things that we're talking about that you guys are not talking about. And I think it's great.
What are some of the topics that you have covered, and what has been the response?
We've covered, and we had a lot. We put feelers out in the beginning. We had a lot of response. People wanted. They want us to talk about how to study the Bible. Some of these we've not covered yet. We may have by the time this airs. I don't know. How to study the Bible, how to start a ministry, what should a young preacher do. There were some that were how to make a difference for your pastor. And some of that parts of that we've covered. Yeah, how to be a blessing to your pastor.
Yeah, that was a great episode.
I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. The response we've got from that, unbelievable. From young people, we have a lot of connections with young people, obviously from youth camp. And then Brother Gabe Carson, Brother Matt Panther, both being young, and they're early 20s, still have a lot of people. So things like when should I move out? What about college? No college? Going to the military? And then there were some like what about the will of God? There were some like. And we haven't covered all these, but they want us to cover suicide. What does the Bible say about suicide?
Sure.
Right.
Finances, pornography, which we actually did a 3-part series on in the very beginning.
It was a great series.
And then let's see, modesty through a man's eyes. At the time of this recording, we've not covered that yet. We still got some things in the works. And then we had it asked to us on to do maybe something on sexual abuse.
Right.
How do you deal with that? How do you handle it? And then someone asked about would we do a series or do some episodes on other religions or cults or things like that.
Sure.
And so those have been some of our topics that we either have covered or are going to cover. We had an episode where we just talked about the bus ministry, how we do ours. And that's a lot about what we're covering. Simply in a nutshell, you could say the Christian Construction Podcast is a podcast that is we're just trying to strengthen that body of believers, because a lot of what we're doing
in that local church,
because we're trying to get people more behind the pastor. We want to be a friend to the pastor,
Right.
And none of me or those two men have pastored, but I feel like after 17 years of being at Love Valley, 18 years of being saved, and then those men, those are local church men. I mean, they are with their pastor, for their pastor. I feel like, because of that, the Lord has.
There's no doubt.
It's not that we know everything, but I think because it's so much in our heart that God has blessed that, and that's kind of that's the thrust of what we're doing there is adding to the local church.
At the podcast, what basically do you have a handle on demographically the ages that you're reaching?
I can't give you particulars, but just by the eyeball test, it seems like we're catching a lot. We are catching some teenagers, but we're catching a lot of middle adults.
Yep.
We are catching a lot of pastors, but we're catching a lot of middle adults, and it does seem to be that we're having more lay people.
Right.
They're not evangelists. They're not missionaries.
Right.
They are faithful local church people, and that's a blessing. That's one of our. We want anybody to watch it, obviously, but that was one of our goals, was to kind of reach that demographic, to be a blessing to the pastors.
Sure.
And so that seems to be our group.
Yeah, what y'all are doing is y'all were. The age y'all are giving a different perspective, because it's not just like you said, three pastors sitting around going to. You've got this in between, and sometimes you're even hearing things. And everything you mentioned about doing a topic on, I mean, that stuff, if you get in a youth camp or if you get in a Jubilee meeting, I mean, those are the things people are working on. I mean, a lot of times our people are in the altars, and that's what they're praying about. God, help me get closer to you.
Yes.
Help me figure out the will of God. And that's a great thing that y'all are doing.
Absolutely.
We're impressed with what God's done through it, and we're supporting you, and we want the family, the Higher Grounds podcast family, to come by and check you folk out.
Absolutely.
Now the podcast is carried on what
we're carried right as of right now. We're carried the video is on YouTube and on Facebook, and then the audio is carried on Google Play, Spotify, and Apple iTunes.
Gotcha. So you're covering most all of the social media
your
platforms.
mainstream,
Great.
Yeah. We do have a Twitter page and Instagram, but those are what the actual episodes are airing, and doing fairly well, doing better in some areas than I thought, and maybe not as well in others as I thought it would. But I'm still amazed that anybody would tune in and listen to anything that Three Country Bumpkins from over at Kings Mountains got to say. That's pretty shocking to me.
That's right.
Probably more audio than visual.
It is, and that really blew my mind. But then the more I thought about it, that's what I do. You're walking on a treadmill, you drive.
Well, I mean, all you got to do is look at you once, and then you're just
you're
hooked on the audio part
again.
Yeah, we're not out here doing.
Hey, can I do this
watch
another way?
Watch me walk up the wall or something. Today's episode.
So who does y'all's makeup?
We have a guy that works at a funeral home, and he's really good.
Yeah. Really good at sprucing people up. You and I were in camp together last week, and I think in light of this, we mentioned this verse, Galatians 6:10.
Yes.
As we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, especially unto them who are of the household of faith.
Sir.
That's right.
And I think whether it's the podcast or what you're doing in your local church, I mean, there ought to be something every day that you purpose that I'm going to try to do something for my fellow man, but people of God, people we're trying to reach. And that's what this is. Yes. I mean, whether it's through camps, whether it's through church or Sunday school class, preaching the Word of God, or podcast.
Amen.
I want to try to be a help with something. I want to help as many as I can.
Amongst our friends, Brother Stephen, we have many of the same friends. Brother Michael and I have many of the same friends. You and I have many of the same friends. But we also have circles that are outside of our circle.
Yes.
Our unified circle.
Yeah.
Where we have influence with people that you don't know, and you have influence with folks I don't know.
Yep.
And so, when you have that, it allows us to cover so much ground.
Yes, sure.
And so, I'm really proud of you guys, and I'm very thankful for how God's blessing you.
And when you're talking about all of us being able to help do that. Our hope, and I think I talked to you about this in the beginning, was wouldn't it be good if not just ours, but there were others that popped up that were of like faith of the same
absolutely.
type. And our hope was that.
So we won't. Yeah.
Because I listen to stuff every day.
Sure.
And so wouldn't it be good if somebody gets up and they listen to Higher Grounds on Monday and then they're listening to, I don't know, Lower Grounds on Tuesday. I don't know. But then something else Wednesday. Yeah, Christian Construction on Thursday. And that's a blessing because you have something to look forward to. So many people are dialed into the wrong things.
Yeah.
Let's give them something good to be dialed
That's
in.
exactly right.
If y'all come up with a Coffee Grounds podcast, I'm coming back and listening.
Yeah. Brother Michael brought the point out, most of the time, even especially young people, not just young people, but even in their 20s,
young adults.
It's like don't do this and don't watch this and don't listen to this. Then I think you ought to get behind when somebody is working to give a substitute for
proactive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Proactive, trying to get something.
Absolutely.
Out.
Absolutely. I like it.
Well, I know here at Higher Grounds, we have seen, phenomenal response to what we're doing, and I travel extensively all over America, and Brother Stephen travels extensively, particularly from May through August.
Yeah,
and Dr. Dex he's always.
He's international.
He's international. He's overseas quite a bit.
Big deal, by the way.
And he's just.
And we ain't talking about pickles.
He's just big. No, he is a great man. We give Dr. Dix a hard time, but he is a great man. But what I was saying was this: everywhere we go, we're having someone talk about, viewing the podcast.
I was sitting in a funeral. And a preacher walks by and says, "Hey, I love y'all's." I'd never seen him. I didn't know who he was.
Yeah. Wow.
I still don't know who he is.
Right.
David Young was supposed to tell me, and he forgot. So he's not watching this because he doesn't.
I was just recently preaching in a church that was located close to Fort Bragg.
Yeah.
And in this church, there were several guys that were Green Berets and Rangers and men that fight to preserve our freedoms for us.
Sure.
And just good men, good godly men who are in the military serving. And their pastor was promoting, he listens all the time, was promoting, what we're doing here at the podcast. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yes.
And you've got folks all over the world. We got folks in Africa who are listening with great regularity to the podcast. And,
Amen.
And then, we cover issues and the questions start coming in.
Yeah.
What about this? Or can you help me with this? And we encourage that. We want you to.
Absolutely.
We want you to send your questions in. We want you to send your comments in. If there are topics that you would like for us to cover, we want to have the opportunity and privilege of doing that.
And I appreciate the guys, whether it's with Christian Construction Podcast or Higher Grounds. It's not okay. Well, let's just sit down and give you 20, 25 minutes on what we think about it.
Right. Yeah,
we're going to do our best to try to dig it out a little bit, get a little info. But at the end of the day, when that podcast signs off, we're going to do our very best to try to see what the Word of God says about it and give you some good truth,
Yes.
And that's probably one thing that turns people away from others is that it's always a thrust of this. Well, this is how I see it.
Yeah.
Right.
This is how I view
Cram it down your throat.
And that's like, and if you don't see it this way, you're wrong. And if we come across something we're wrong about it, then let's admit we're wrong and take the Word of God for it and get be right about it.
Well, in regard to that, I was talking to one guy that was listening to the podcast. He said, "Here's what I like about it." He said, "It's like we're just sitting down in the living room together, and all of us are listening together and talking back and forth together. It's like we're just sitting down for a conversation." I said, "Well, that's the feel we want to give."
Sure.
And then I think about the format that we try to give to you as a listening audience, and I know from your podcast as well. Mm-hmm. What we try to do is we try to give a balanced approach to any topic or subject that we're looking at, and we may stand extremely firm on a particular issue or doctrine or whatever. But what we want to do is, in the process of doing this, we don't want to land blast or be disparaging toward anyone that disagrees with us.
Right.
We want to engage them.
Absolutely.
And we may laugh back and forth.
Yeah.
In a not in a snarky way, but in in just a jesting way, and yet understand that when we're trying to present where we stand, we want to do it in a kind way.
Absolutely.
And not with our opinions with our attitude making our point, but rather let the Word of God as we see it make its point.
Yes,
yes sir. Let it stand.
There's some issues that we stand very firmly on, and we're never going to back up on because of what we see in the Word of God. But our stand will remain the same, but our stance is going to be very balanced, very kind.
One thing I've learned from you really has been, and I think I even apply it to the podcast or anything, is that just because I don't agree with somebody, or I may not have them in our pulpit, or take my kids to listen to, it doesn't mean I can't glean something from that guy.
That's exactly right.
We were talking this morning about a man that obviously we're not going to bring him in, to teach any seminars at our church, but there's things about leadership,
right?
Yeah,
and all that. And I want to be a good leader, so I want to take something from him. If I can take something from him, and not take everything in his lifestyle, but I can take something that's going to help me to be a better man, then by all means, I'm going to do that.
Well, and it's a developed character to be able to chew and spit.
That's exactly right.
And you can't take, and I don't mean this in a negative way by no stretch of the imagination, but as a new convert, you can't take a new convert who doesn't know how to chew and spit and put things in front of them that they buy into some stuff that's going to go in the wrong direction.
Sure.
Now, I'll give, for instance, I know of a particular writer, and when it comes to the home and when it comes to the family, man, they're tremendous.
Sure.
You can't get any better when it comes to the home and when it comes to the family. But when it comes to their understanding of expositional truth through the epistles and the Old Testament,
way out there.
Oh, they have real problems. They have real problems getting a handle wrapped around
rightly dividing the
word truth. And the reason is they're trying to take the home, which is their thrust, and bend everything around that.
Yeah.
You see, and so you've got people that are young converts. You want to give them that good material.
Sure.
But you have to be careful.
Guard.
So it's a developed trait, and you have to learn to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Amen. Well, man, it's been.
We need to talk to me. We have been blessed. We have been given several bags from John and Amanda Wetherill.
Yes.
And they have been from a local West End Coffee Roasters in Greenville. And they've been supplying us with some good bags of coffee. And what blend is this?
This is espresso, not espresso.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's get it
spelled
down
much
right.
differently.
All of you people that go to these coffee shops don't know what you're doing, and you say, I want some espresso. It's not espresso. It's espresso. Milano. Dark roast blend. It is from West End Coffee Roasters.
And enjoying it.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
And I get a little snarky there, I guess. You get into good coffee.
You did well the whole episode.
But when you become a coffee connoisseur, you get a little snobbish.
Oh yeah, you get a little snobbish.
If I open the cabinet and there's JFG in there, we got to do something about
problems.
that.
We need some fresh ground.
Amen.
Fresh pulled stuff.
Hey, I got a quote.
Hey, give us a good quote.
This comes from Brother Brett Pilata. He said, "We need less me time and more knee time." Have you ever heard that before?
No, but I just kind of knew where you.
Oh, you know where I was going. Amen.
Yeah.
Well, and So how's the camp business going this
It's
year?
been great. Been a great year
Amen.
already.
Are you
Lord's
tired?
Been blessed. Yeah,
You act a little hungover.
I think that's a good way. That's a good way
It's
to
a
say
youth
it.
camp, ain't
It's
it?
youth camp. It's youth camp.
Yeah.
So you're going to be.
Okay.
But we're hanging in there, and it's been a
We're
great
making it.
Amen.
summer.
Amen.
And Laura's been working in camps, and so
Amen.
I'm very grateful. Still got a couple more weeks to go, but it's been wonderful. I love
Amen.
it. Wouldn't change it for anything.
Well, we're going to sign off, brother. Good
Amen.
to see you. Glad you come by. All
for
right.
having me.
Well, from the Higher Grounds podcast, you hang in there like a hair in a biscuit.
Yeah.
And you keep pressing on the upward way. God bless.